Yogiri is a failed lab experiment who unlocks an instant death skill, but is Isekai'd into a world ruled by powerful mages. However, everything changes when he realizes he has to beat all the dark mages to return home. So he teams up with his hot classmate and starts clapping everyone. It all begins during a field trip where a bus transporting Yogiri and his classmates passes through a tunnel and lands them in a place not available on Google Maps. Suddenly, a sage named Shion enters the bus and explains that they've been Isekai'd. But when she gets interrupted by the teacher, she clocks him out of existence and warns the others to pay attention to her. She then explains that this world is ruled by sages and they were summoned as candidates to replenish their numbers. Just then, she equips the students with special powers, except for a few who are strangely incompatible. While the lucky ones check out their stats, Shion tells them to aim to become a sage within a month, starting with a mission to slay a dragon. After she leaves, Yazaki, the chat of the group, takes charge and suggests they all work together while Yogiri naps like he's in a 5-star hotel suite. Suddenly, Yazaki traps the ungifted losers on the bus and reveals that they'll be used as bait to distract the dragon while the others make it to the city. After the scumbags escape, the dragon attacks the bus and snacks on some of the students, leaving only Yogiri and a girl named Tomo alive. Desperate, Tomo wakes the snoozing idiot up to the impending attack and uses her melons to motivate him to do something. At that moment, Yogiri mumbles something, causing the dragon to stop midair and crash into the ground. Tomo can't believe her eyes and asks if he executed the dragon, but Yogiri says it probably died of a heart attack after seeing her melons. When they get out of the bus, 3 of the classmates who abandoned them come flying back, causing Yogiri to consider unsubscribing them from life. As the boys descend, they demand that Tomo follow them for a 4-way fun session, but she refuses. So one of them shows her he's well equipped to make human barbecue. At this, Yogiri points at the dude and tells him to die, amusing the other boys until the makeshift Fire Lord drops dead. As the other 2 start to panic, Yogiri offs another one and explains to the land whale left standing, Diamond, that his ability is called Instant Death, which means he can take the life or any target he chooses. He then asks Diamond why he and his buddies got power drunk, and Diamond explains that he and his friends had been summoned to the world once before to defeat a demon lord. Curious, Yogiri asks how long it took, and Diamond reveals that although they spent over a year, only a few hours had passed when they returned to the real world. Now satisfied with the info dump, Yogiri plans to reunite Demon with his friends, but Demon takes out a magical slave collar and begs to become their servant instead. Immediately he puts it on, he loses his ability to disobey orders, so Yogiri orders him to hang out in a forest full of dangerous beasts and leave all of his prized possessions behind. With no choice, Demon heads for the forest, leaving behind enough suspicious treasure to attract investigations from the feds. After, Tomo asks why Yogiri chooses to trust and protect her, so he reveals that he's ready to risk it all after feeling the bounciness of her melons when she jumped on him. Meanwhile, the sage Shion is alone in bedroom when her assistant Yuichi barges in and informs her that 2 S-rank sages were eliminated easily. He then suspects that the instant death magic is being used, but Shion says it's nothing to worry about and dismisses him just to get back to grinding her pillow. Some moments later, Yogiri and Tomo arrive in a town, where they talk to the soldiers but are surprised when they speak a different language. Eventually, they meet a guy named Masahiko whose tongue isn't encrypted, and he asks if they're with a group that showed up earlier. Yogiri confirms this and states that they're just trying to catch up with the others. However, when Yogiri asks if the others are headed to the royal capital, Masahiko says they're not allowed to interfere or help in any way. As they leave, Masahiko says that Tomo is welcome to gag on his candy stick, prompting her to grab Yogiri and flee the scene. Surprised, Yogiri asks why she ran like that, and Tomo says she was scared he'd wipe out everyone within a 5-mile radius. In response, Yogiri says he's not like Yagami but pauses when he notices they're surrounded by ears and tails. Just the Miryu, a cat girl, introduces herself and offers to play their tour guide. Yogiri then gets suspicious and asks Miryu what's in it for her, and she explains that the strokes from sage candidates hit differently.
This is business!
However, she assumes Tomo is his girlfriend and says she's not a home wrecker. Some hours later, after a shopping spree, they get surrounded by characters from Animal Farm, so Yogiri asks if they're after the money, but the thieves say they're hunting talentless sage candidates. At this point, Tomo warns Miryu that her business partners can't handle Yogiri, but she says it's a bluff. Suddenly, Yogiri takes out the thieves behind them and partially unalives the thieves by aiming for parts of their bodies. Seeing this, Miryu and the last of the thieves beg to be spared, but Yogiri takes them out. Yogiri and Tomo then try to leave, but Adele, the captain of the guards, stops them for questioning. In response, Yogiri claims they simply took a wrong turn and ended up at the crime scene, but Adele points out that she saw the criminals attacking them suddenly collapse. In addition, Edil says they're trying to hunt down the leader of the goons and suggests they don't try anything funny, so George, Edil's assistant, appraises them and reveals that neither of them has gifts, proving it's unlikely they're suspects. Afterwards, they arrive at a hotel where Yaogiri asks Tomo if they should share a room,
You naughty.
but she says she's not ready to pop her cherry yet. On checking her room, Tomo hops on the bed and wonders if Yaogiri is interested in devouring her cookie. While she flashes back to his comments about her, a ghost who needs a gym subscription appears in the room. Surprised, Tomo asks what she's doing in the world, but the ghost introduces herself as Momo and reveals that she's there to protect Tomo as a guardian angel. Annoyed, Tomo says she's late and asks why she didn't show up earlier, but Momo explains that she was scared of being permanently logged out of life by Yaogiri. On hearing this, Tomo figures Yaogiri's powers work on spirits too, while Momo requests that Tomo introduce her properly to Yaogiri the next day to avoid tragic surprises. After agreeing to this, Tomo asks Momo how she'll help her, and Momo reveals that in protecting Tomo, she prevented her from getting the gift from Shion, since it would have only made her a puppet for the sages. So, Tomo asks if everyone without gifts is protected by spirits like her, but Momo says she's only protected as the successor of the Danora School of Archery, whose mixed martial arts have existed for a long time. When Momo says that her goal is to get Tomo back to the world she came from, Tomo hesitates, since she's become totally reliant on Yaogiri since they jumped worlds. So Momo decides to train Tomo in the true arts of the Danora School. The next day, Yaogiri introduces Celestina, a concierge at the hotel, to Tomo and reveals that she helped him locate their classmates on a map. So Celestina hands them train tickets to the royal capital, and Yaogiri takes some of their loot and tells her to invest it for him. Surprised, Tomo says it's beyond the scope of a concierge, but Celestina agrees to get it done. Later, on the train, Yaogiri plays his game while Tomo complains about Momo sitting on her, but Momo says it's not a big deal, since she's not taking up any physical space. So Tomo suggests she floats over to Yaogiri, but she says he's too scary. When Tomo asks Yaogiri if he can see Momo too, he confirms that he can and suggests that Tomo sit with him instead. Not long after she sits beside him, Yaogiri suddenly shields her with his body as the train's roof gets blown off. Yaogiri then assumes the attacker wasn't aiming at them intentionally, so they get off the train and spot a hero attacking an aggressor. Tomo then suggests he takes them out, but Yaogiri reminds her that he's not a psychopathic murdering machine. While Tomo apologizes, another giant explosion rocks the area and the fighting do suddenly brings their fight closer to where they stand. While the people freak out, Santaro takes out his frustration on them. So Yaogiri asks Santaro why he attacked the people when they're not even part of the fight. But since the idiot exhibits his god complex common to all sages, Yaogiri snuffs him out immediately. Seeing this, the aggressor suddenly dumps his aggression and promises to grant them any request they make within his power. So, Yaogiri asks the robot how to return to his original world, and he hints that they'll need the coordinates of his original world and lots of energy to get back there. Somewhere else, Edil and George question one of the blind survivors of Yaogiri's experiments, since healing magic didn't work on him. Lane, their leader, plucks out his eye and heals him with a new one. However, when his sight isn't restored, she turns him into a vampire, but still, he remains blind. Suddenly, a hero breaks into the building and attacks Lane, but she doesn't get hurt, surprising her companions. Lane then asks Ein why he'd attacked her when he should be out hunting demon lords, but Ein claims that all sages need to be wiped out, so he levels up the entire building. Surprisingly, Lane appears before him again and reveals that she's immortal. Ein then begs Lane to end him, but she tosses him off the building and orders Edel and George to track down Yaogiri. Later, Lane and Shion discuss Santaro's defeat and wonder if Yaogiri and Tomo could have pulled it off without their talents. Shion then concludes that Yaogiri must have the instant death ability and suggests they focus on the aggressors rather than the sage candidates. After Shion leaves, Lane orders Masayuki, his subordinate, to take the immortal court and head for Hanabusa. Meanwhile, when Yaogiri and Tomo decide to take a break somewhere in the forest, Momo suddenly appears with a sword she recovered from the robot and explains that it's an item that can freely change its form. The next morning, when they arrive at Hanabusa, Tomo notices Yaogiri looking like a deflated balloon, since he's been ending their attackers without Tomo knowing. When she spots the pile of bodies behind them, Tomo figures he gets tired when he uses his powers and worries about him. However, Yaogiri assures her that he can go on and on popping shots. Shortly after, they arrive at a hotel where they run into Yuki, one of their classmates, who then says he split from the others since they're too mid for his level. Suddenly, Erika, one of his companions with benefits, accuses Tomo of trying to steal her man. Following Yuki's order, the other maintenance-free Juliets introduced themselves, including Stephanie, Chelsea, Euphemia, and Riza, who were quite hostile with their introductions. Pissed off, Tomo tells them to cut the crap while Yaogiri whispers in her ears and says that Yuki was left behind like they were. When he adds that Yuki must have acquired an ability that gave him balls the size of an asteroid, Tomo chips in that he's always been handy with ladies. Almost immediately, Yuki offers to add Tomo to his waifu collection, surprising Tomo as he explains that he could take Yaogiri on as his shoe cleaner if she's worried about him. Amused, Yaogiri says he'd feel bad about offing such a senseless dude, while Tomo asks Yuki why he's so ballsy. In response, Yuki says he's a dominator, a class that controls everyone, and when Tomo suggests that he trains like their other classmates, Yuki says she's probably smitten. He then goes on to narrate how the city threw him a party after his first mission, and he got approached by Haruto, a classmate, who claimed he's a consultant. Haruto advised him to purchase servants who would make him more servants by defeating enemies, and help him level up by transferring their experience to him. After justifying his harem collection, Yuki asks Tomo to reconsider his request, but she quickly refuses, so Yuki leaves with his fan club. Yaogiri then tells Tomo that she might be safer with Yuki than she is with him, annoying Tomo, so he apologizes. Some days later, Tomo wonders how much longer they'll have to stay in the hotel, and Momo comments that they'll wait until Yaogiri awakens from his beauty sleep. So Tomo asks Momo to check on him, but she refuses since he might wake on the wrong side of the bed. Somewhere else, Lane observes an aggressor named Darkness and thinks it's definitely no match for her. Meanwhile, Tomo thinks they're getting some air, but suddenly sees some dark smoke arising from the city. Unknown to them, it's Masayuki and the undead unit of the Immortal Court starting the chaos in the city. When Momo comments that the attackers are riddled with the stench of death, Tomo changes her mind and shuts the curtains. After this, Momo reveals that someone is secretly watching them with hostile intent and is invisible to the eye. Tomo quickly grabs the phone to wake Yaogiri up, but he's busy dreaming about his childhood days. When he eventually awakens, he heads out, and on scanning the hallway, he spots Erika doing something sus. So he instantly unplugs her with his ability, and the moment she drops dead, he heads to Tomo's room to tell her she's got a bullseye on her back. After this, he calls the reception to notify them of a woman who collapsed in the hallway to avoid being brought in on criminal mens. Shortly after, Tomo identifies Erika as one of Yuki's bodyguards, and Yaogiri figures that Yuki would be furious, so they decide to leave. Somewhere else, Yuki gets notified of Erika's termination and wonders what happened. However, he gets interrupted when a demon appears and suddenly tries to attack him. Unfortunately, the demon loses an arm, and Yuki stuns it with a flare bomb. He then forms a contract with the demon and asks him how deep the ruins go. When the demon reveals that there are 150 floors, Yuki orders it to get more allies. After the demon leaves, Yuki wonders what happened to Erika and checks her log. He then discovers she was taken out stealthily, which is strange since she's an assassin. So he asks why Erika was in the hallway, and Euphemia reveals that she must have gone to either capture or eliminate Tomo. Hearing this, Yuki figures Tomo must be on the run and decides to send Riza and Chelsea after her. Outside the city, Lane evades Darkness attacks and blasts a hole through its head, but this does nothing to the aggressor and keeps moving towards the city. Meanwhile, Yaogiri and Tomo hurry out of the hotel but run into Riza, who then freezes them up and reveals that Yuki ordered their capture. While she promises that they won't get hurt if they follow her quietly, Yaogiri breaks through the ice using his ability. Shocked, Riza summons a bigger block of ice, but Yaogiri crushes it alongside her wand. Afterwards, he asks if she's hiding any other wand, and when Riza pulls one out of her Grand Canyon, Tomo berates Yaogiri for staring too long. Yaogiri then asks about the rest of her group, and Riza reveals that everyone is on a mission to get Tomo. Suddenly, a shadow attacks them, but Tomo quickly grabs it and slams it into the ground, surprising everyone. Yaogiri wonders how she got so strong, and Momo says their training has finally paid off. On looking closer, they realize the shadow is a doll, but before long, they get surrounded by clones of this same doll. Suddenly, Riza pulls out a wand from her hair, but Yaogiri takes her out immediately. Unknown to them, the dolls are under Chelsea's control, so she orders the doll to attack, but Yaogiri takes them all out in a moment. Shortly after, they find Chelsea, who then pleads to be spared. In the ruins, Yuki informs his companions that Riza's dead and adds that Chelsea leaked their intel to the ops, so he sends bugs under his control to spy on them, freaking Tomo out. She then suggests that he wipes them all out, but Yaogiri says the bugs will end up falling on them. So while they make their way among the bugs, Yuki observes them and thinks Yaogiri can't use his powers when surrounded. Euphemia then advises Yuki to avoid making an enemy of a power he's clueless about. However, Yuki reminds her why he's a dominator and commands the bugs to attack. Sensing the bug get murderous, Yaogiri tracks Yuki's location using the murderous intent from the bugs and snuffs him out immediately. Meanwhile, in the ruins, the ladies try to jumpstart Yuki, but since it doesn't work, Euphemia says they're released from his control, and takes her leave. On stepping out of the ruins, she sees darkness heading towards the city and Lane floating in the air. Lane then casts a spell on Euphemia and bites her to find out everything she knows. At the same time, Yogiri and Tomo step out in the hotel to find the city overrun by zombies in a party mood. While the city gets swarmed by the Walking Dead, Yogiri says they can find their way out, but when Tomo points out that they should be helping, Yogiri says it's too late to save the city. Somewhere else, Ryota, the mayor of the city, orders Masayuki to round up his zombies and leave. However, Masayuki says he's acting on Lane's orders and picks the key to the city, making Ryota wonder what he's up to. After this, Masayuki orders the zombies to stop moving, displays Yogiri and Tomo's pictures, and orders the people to bring them to the central plaza within an hour, or it'll be back to World Wars. Hearing this, Yogiri and Tomo hide in an alley and wonder why everyone's after them. Just then, Yogiri flashes back to the moment he took out Santaro, and just then, some of the people found them. Yogiri threatens to unalive them if they move close, but one of them ignores and attacks first. When he drops dead, the other two get freaked out and run off, making Yogiri realize they're only trying to survive. So he decides to negotiate with Masayuki, and a few moments later, he and Tomo arrive at the plaza where he finds Masayuki and Ryota waiting. After they introduce themselves, Masayuki insults them for willingly sacrificing themselves to save the city. In response, Yogiri asks Masayuki to take down the barrier so they can make their way to the royal capital. However, Masayuki gets mad and reminds them that they're in no position to make demands. So Yogiri offers to let him live if he lets them out, but this annoys Masayuki more, so he orders the undead to attack. Suddenly, Yogiri takes them all out and surprises Masayuki, who then wonders how the undead died. Suddenly, Masayuki begins to transform into Dracula, but Yogiri takes him out before he finishes. When they approach Ryota, he begs for his life and says he doesn't want any more damage to the city, but Yogiri says they're only trying to survive too. So Ryota reveals that Masayuki was acting on Lane's orders and explains that Lane controls the city and its surroundings. While Tomi wonders why the sages are after their lives, Momo arrives and notifies them of an impending attack directed at them, and Yogiri says he can feel death intent coming from all directions. Just then, they spot the city residents heading towards the plaza like they're programmed. So Ryota hurries to get the city key and tries to undo the spirit magic. However, when it doesn't work, Ryota says that Lane must be directly involved. Outside the city, Lane asks Euphemia how dangerous she thinks Yogiri is, and she suggests that they quit messing with him. Lane then says she can't do that, but worries because Euphemia is concerned despite knowing what she's capable of. At the plaza, Yogiri and Tomo are surrounded by a herd of brainless citizens, so Tomo suggests that he replicate the Yuki takedown, but Yogiri says it's different this time. Suddenly, one of the citizens attacks, but Yogiri drops in without flinching. Following this, more citizens attack, so Yogiri takes them all out while Ryota tries to maintain his composure. Meanwhile, Lane figures it's time to wreak havoc in the city, so she clones herself, surprising Euphemia, who then asks what she's up to. In response, Lane explains that she's putting her incredible restoration ability to use. Afterwards, she commands her clone to ascend and form more clones, thereby increasing the death intent Yogiri feels in the city. Suddenly, darkness strolls into the city, and to everyone's shock, everything vanishes wherever he passes. At the same time, Lane states that her copies have no memory of Yogiri and hence have no death intent towards him. So she orders them to attack the city once darkness behaves abnormally or when it dies. Back in the city, Tomo asks Yogiri if he can take out the aggressor, and when he says he can, Ryota begs him to do something. So, despite feeling like it's a bad idea, Yogiri takes out darkness since he had to do something. The moment darkness goes down, Lane's clones attack like a meteor shower over the city. Quickly, Yogiri tells everyone to take cover, and once the shower stops, he realizes he's been taking refuge in Tomo's Milk Mountains. With many dead, Ryota asks him to do something, so Yogiri gets up, while Tomo reveals that she can see women in red dresses descending like meteors. On hearing this, Ryota states that it's definitely Lane. So Tomo asks Yogiri if he can take out the source of the attacks, but he says he can't, since she's not attacking him directly. After this, Tomo asks Ryota how many Lanes exist, and he reveals that she must have made clones of herself to do the dirty work. So Yogiri gets an idea that'll work only if Lane attacks him directly. Just then, Ryota displays a holographic map of the city and discovers a pattern to Lane's attacks. As a result, they predict Lane's next targets, and when Yogiri tries to leave for one of the targets, Ryota says he can teleport them there since he still has some control over the city. At the same time, Tomo says she's going too, since her impressive eyesight can spot Lane from a mile away. Shortly after, they arrive at the location and almost immediately, Tomo spots an incoming attack. Quickly, Yogiri grabs Tomo and runs to get smoked by the meteor. Fortunately, Momo is quick to cast a spell which shields them from the hit. Afterwards, she gives Tomo a scroll she got from an aggressor and reveals that it transformed into the shield that saved them. Some moments later, Yogiri does his thing and Lane's clones drop all over the city. Sensing this, Lane figures she should have made the clones look different and prevented Yogiri from spamming his magic like that. Hearing this, Euphemia comments that she should have left the Grim Ray Upper alone, but Lane decides to make different copies next. Suddenly, she gets the touch of death and feels her soul leave her body, and as she drops, she only thinks of saving a girl. In a castle somewhere else, a girl awakens in a coffin and finds a glowing crystal, which then displays a holographic message where Lane explains that the girl is a respawn of her after she died. However, she adds that the girl is a different person and won't have any of her memories to protect her from Yogiri's attacks. The next morning, Yogiri and Tomo get on one of Masayuki's trucks, and since his driving is on par with truck Kun's, Tomo decides to drive instead while Momo offers to tutor her on the way. Somewhere in the forest, Ryoko, another of the sage candidates, practices her samurai skills on a beast and takes it out while her friends cheer her on. However, on returning to her tent in camp, she finds Carol, who then returns her phone and confesses that she stole it just to use her Yogiri monitoring tool, since her group created a satellite to monitor him, but it doesn't work in the world. Ryoko then gets alerted on her phone that the first door is opening. On the way to the royal capital, Tomo almost runs the truck off a cliff and realizes it's time to hand over to Yogiri.
Women.
However, Yogiri is asleep, so she focuses back on driving and slams the brakes when she spots a boulder in the way. Meanwhile, Yogiri dreams about the first time he met Asaka. Asaka is a teacher who visited a research institute for an interview and realized on the contract that she could die on the job. So she headed for the door, but Yukio, the interviewer, begged her to stay and explained that the facility works to benefit people. Shortly after, Yukio showed her around and told her she'll be taking care of a monster named Alpha Omega, who could take down anyone if he wanted to. Hearing this, Asaka immediately realized she'd applied for the wrong job. However, Yukio explained that she needed to educate the monster to avoid a Terminator aftermath. Despite this, Asaka pointed out that there are more qualified people for the job, but Yukio insisted she's just the right fit. Shortly after, they arrived at a vault where Yukio handed her an instruction manual and said that his job was done. After he left, Asaka opened the vault, hoping she didn't lead humanity to its end, and stepped into an environment made to look like a farm. On checking the manual, she found her way to the house and carefully walked in, half expecting to be jumped by something from Resident Evil. Surprisingly, on opening the door, she found Yogiri sitting alone, so she quickly grabbed him and threw him out while wondering if the facility fed young boys to their pet monster. When she told Yogiri to go and play, a shadow suddenly appeared behind Asaka, but Yogiri took it out using his powers. Surprised, Asaka asked what it was and Yogiri explained that it's a devil that snuck in with her shadow. In addition, he explains that they often visit to unalive him. Just then, Asaka realized he was the monster, so she introduced herself while Yogiri said he's hungry. So Asaka checked the house and found everything she needed, but since her cooking is only a little better than yours, she opted for instant noodles instead. While they ate, Asaka decided to give him a name. So after looking into his eyes, she was reminded of a dog, so she named him Yogiri. Suddenly, Tomi wakes Yogiri from his sleep and tells him they're at a dead end. When she berates him for sleeping like a log on a bumpy ride, Yogiri says he's burned out from repopulating the earth, so they decide to reverse and find some other route, but the car suddenly stops, and when they step out to check it, a dragon attacks them, but Yogiri puts it out of its misery, and as it drops down the cliff, Tomo points out that its reinforcements have arrived. Seeing this, Yogiri figures they're in enemy territory and makes it rain dead dragons, and shortly after, a golden dragon shows up with lightning in its mouth, but eventually leaves to allow them to pass. However, Yogiri tells it to stop or it'll join its fallen comrades. Shortly after, the dragon turns into Attila, a blue-haired girl who then kneels before them, wishing she had flown away silently. Yogiri then asks why they attacked them, and Attila says she was testing to see if they're qualified to see the Sword Master. Confused, Yogiri asks who that is and says they're only headed for the royal capital. Attila then begs them to follow her since the Sword Master is as good as any sage. Hearing this, Yogiri guesses the Sword's Master might be able to help them return to their original world. Shortly after, they arrive in a forest and find some other warriors waiting to meet the Sword Master. Just then, Attila announces that they'll be choosing the next Knight of the Divine King, but Yogiri says she's just trying to get them in trouble. Just then, Urabe, the Sword's Master, arrives and tells the contestants to start cutting each other up. Uninterested, Yogiri decides to opt out, but Urabe says everyone fails if he does that. Suddenly, the purge begins, and when a couple of warriors charge towards Yogiri, a knight suddenly defends him and says that the Sword Master is testing to see if they have good intentions. Unknown to him, someone was casting a spell aimed at him, so Yogiri takes them all out. Just then, they realize Urabe has taken care of the other insolent goons. Meanwhile, one of the wounded warriors crawls to retrieve a rainbow-colored stone, so Tomo helps him out and he suddenly gets restored to normal. Afterward, Yusubi tells them to follow him, but when Yogiri and Tomo hesitate, Attila begs them to participate in the trial and become the Knights of the Divine King so she can become their follower. So they oblige, and on their way, the knight introduces himself as Rick, while the guy who used an auto-revive kit introduces himself as Lionel and says he was invited by a friend. So Yogiri asks Rick about the Divine King, and he explains that the Divine King is the one who handles demons that are sealed away. 1,000 years ago, the Divine King sealed off a dark god, but his spawns keep trying to revive him. Meanwhile, Tomo asks Lionel about his rainbow stones, and he exclaims that the stones can heal him from injury. When he adds that he got them as an apology from a goddess after being unlucky too many times, Rick asks what else the stones could do, and he demonstrates how he could exchange 3 of the stones for a random item. Moments later, they cross a barrier of invisibility and find a tall tower, which Momo warns them to get away from after sensing the presence of miasma. While Momo protects Tomo, Yogiri and Rick watch Lionel vomiting because of the miasma, so he uses a rainbow stone on himself. After Momo points out that the miasma is gone, they notice Attila is gone, so Rick says she must have been stopped by the barrier. So they quickly join some other warriors on an elevator and arrive at the top, where Urobe shows them the end of the world. Just then, Tomo zooms in and spots a frozen man in black and a woman in white at the center of a giant energy field. When she adds that the woman ran the man through with a sword, Rick explains that the woman is likely the sword master, while the man in black is the dark god. Suddenly, Frederica, Lionel's friend, appears and says she's ready to defeat the dark god. She then launches a sunburst attack into the energy field, but Varabi explains that it'll take 1,000 years before any attack reaches its target. After this, Urabi announces the start of the selection test, and the contestants are told that they'll have to make it down the tower in 24 hours to qualify, so other warriors join them on the tower. Tomo then suggests that Yogiri clap the dark god with his ability, but Yogiri's mind is somewhere else. He then whispers something in Tomo's ear, making her freak out. Afterwards, Yogiri and Tomo decide to make their way down the tower, and just then, Frederica demands a magic stone from Lionel to replenish her magic, but he says it only works for him, so she storms off. On entering the tower, they find the bodies of anxious warriors who had gone ahead, and Rick explains that they must have fallen to traps or monsters. As they proceed, he warns them to be wary of the traps, but Lionel suddenly steps on one and gets impaled. Luckily, he uses his auto-revive kit and attaches one to his hand, in case it happens again. Because of this, Lion leads the way and steps into a room to scout it. But the door suddenly closes and he screams, so the others go in after him. Just then, Rick finds Teresa, an ex-mate, lurking in the dark and asks why she's taking the test when she's already a divine knight. In response, Teresa says she got stripped of her title for taking too many lives and is trying to regain her title. So Rick tells the other to step out while he handles it, but Tomo points out that the room is rigged with thin wires. Suddenly, Teresa attacks with her many strings, but Yogiri simply snuffs her out and spots Lionel's amputated hand on the floor. So they find the other half of Lionel and help him before they continue. Later, they arrive at a safe zone where accommodation is available, so while the others decide to stay for the night, Rick chooses to continue. After Lion takes a room, the receptionist tells Yogiri and Tomo that there is only one room left. On entering the room, Tomo tells Yogiri that there won't be any happy endings since Momo will be watching, but Momo says she'll hide in the wall if things get steamy. Ignoring all these, Yogiri slips on his nightwear and crashes for the night. Meanwhile, in the other room, Lionel waits for his stones to be replenished by midnight and suddenly gets an offer where he can exchange his stones for an ultra-rare item. Without wasting time, Lionel takes the offer, hoping to get a baddie for the night, and to his shock, Bahanato, the goddess who gave him the stones, suddenly appears. Excited, he asks if she spits or swallows. But the goddess says she only stopped by to tell him that she has updated his save point such that he'll get to start over from the hotel room whenever he dies. Somewhere else in the tower, Rurobi is informed about some issues they're having with the tower. When he says it's not a biggie, his assistant states that they need to replenish the demons used for the first barrier soon. Far from all this, Ayoi, an assassin, is on a mission to tie up loose ends, and after confirming with her magic eye that she has the right target, Rikito attacks her using all he's got, but she ends up slitting his throat from behind. Afterwards, Ayoi gets ordered to head to Hanabusa to hunt down Yogiri and Tomo next. On realizing they're sage candidates, Ayoi wonders why she gets to take out the trash. As she leaves, she hears someone screaming and stops to find Daimon, who then introduces himself and explains his slavery timeline from Yogiri to Rikudo. He then begs her to take him on since he needs someone to tell him what to do with his brain. The next day, Tomo wakes to find Yogiri using her chest pointers as a pillow, so she freaks out. However, when Momo asks for her help, Tomo spots Momo stuck in the wall and asks how it happened. In response, Momo says she got stuck while peeking to see if any action is going on and adds that the tower is trying to absorb all spirits in it. Just when Yaogiri awakens, the walls try to suck Momo in, so he shuts down the suction mechanism. After Momo falls out of the wall, she wonders why they're gathering the souls of the dead in the tower, and Yaogiri states that there's likely another reason for the trial. After this, Yaogiri tells Tomo to harden up, since things will get bloody from that point on, but Tomo says she's been down with him taking life all along. Hearing this, Yaogiri realizes he's found the one and suddenly glows red, so he hides his face and says he's hungry. Meanwhile, Aoi and her human pet arrive in the mountains and encounter the golden dragon. Diamond then suggests that they retreat, but the dragon charges at Aoi, who then calmly tells it that it's too big to fly. Suddenly, the dragon backs off and Aoi explains that she has an ability that makes things happen just by believing them. Just when Diamond feels too comfortable, the dragon crawls up the mountain and takes off his arm. While he heals himself, the dragon tries to attack again, but suddenly loses its head to an aggressor named Hedgehog, who then gathers intel from the dragon. Afterwards, Aoi catches a glimpse of the tower before the hedgehog flies away and suggests they head there next to find their targets. But since Diamond knows how dangerous Yaogiri is, Aoi had to drag him along. Back at the tower, Tomo comments that their journey is hitch-free, and Yaogiri says he's taken down the riddles and traps by using his magic. Suddenly, Iglesia, the creator of the tower, appears and accuses them of cheating. Hearing this, Yaogiri promises not to mess anything more up if he lets them out, but Iglesia activates his staff and gives them options on how to off them. However, before he finishes, Yaogiri terminates him somewhere else in the tower. Rick slays an opponent and attains the required 100 points to qualify. Just then, he finds Federica trying to help Lionel gain some points too. Luckily, Lionel slays his opponent and tells Rick how he finally got a gear by gambling with his precious stones. At the same time, Yaogiri and Tomo arrive at an arena where two warriors clash swords and a jerk sitting on a throne hypes his dog in the fight. After watching the duel for a bit, Yaogiri suggests they leave since it's not their business, but realizes the throne is near the entrance for a reason. While the duel continues and gets intense, Yaogiri says he'd like to pass, and Tomo scolds him for failing to read the room. So Masaki promises to let him pass if they team up with Theodisa and join the fight against his warriors. After this, Masaki instructs his warriors on what to do with their opponents, but he's barely finished when Yaogiri snuffs them all out and heads for the entrance. Pained by this, Masaki tries to take revenge, but Yaogiri sends him along with his warriors. Seeing this, Theodisa stops them and begs them to help her, so Yaogiri looks to Tomo for answers. Tomo then suggests they hear her out at least. Shortly after, Theodisa reveals that she's looking for her sister and some of her people who are trapped in the tower, so they agree to help, and when they ask how they'll find her people, Theodisa suggests they start underground since she can feel their presence there. Just then, Rick, Lionel, and Frederica arrive and they had a brief reunion moment. A few moments later, they arrive at the ground floor of the tower, where they find other warriors who made it and Urabe, who then congratulates them on making it. Just when he declares them Knights of the Divine King, his subordinates show up and reveal that the barriers are collapsing. Suddenly, the tower trembles and light floods the hall, signifying the destruction of the first barrier. Just then, Organ, a dude with black wings, shows up and says that he thought the barriers would be destroyed once he destroys the tower. So Urabe orders the knights to defeat the dude for the sake of humanity. While this happens, Yaogiri and his companions sneak off to find Theobisa's people. Terrified, Lionel suggests that they escape too, but Rick and Frederica are ready to become legends. Just then, Organ asks Urabe how to destroy the barrier and starts dropping the knights one after the other to get an answer. Suddenly, an ambitious ninja uses Naruto's favorite jutsu and attacks him from all directions, but they're all eliminated in a moment. Seeing this, Frederica pulls off the biggest attack she knows, but the dude absorbs it with his palm. Just then, another guy appears and introduces himself as Lute, so Frederica attacks him instead, but Lute turns the staff and her arm into a snack. Seeing this, Rick attacks Lute with his sword, but he dodges the attacks. While this goes on, Lionel gets notified of another raffle draw, so he quickly exchanges his stones, hoping to get Saitama's abilities, but to his surprise, Vahinato appears with weapons. So he asks if she's checking on him again, but Vahinato says she's serious this time and decides to take care of things. However, Organ suddenly bows to Vahinato while Lute hugs her, surprising everyone as they watch the reunion. After this, Vahinato tells Lionel that meeting her is the unluckiest thing that has happened to him since she plans on wiping out humanity. Down the tower stairs, Yaogiri points out that they're going around in a loop and says it might be a ploy to hide an important facility. Theodisa then confirms this by saying she senses her people's magic nearby. Just when they wonder how to break the barrier, something slashes through it and speeds past them. Since only she saw it, Tomo flinches and says that a monster looking like a plane passed through her body. Shortly after, Theodisa finds a room, and on entering it, it finds some bodies kept in tubes, which Theodisa confirms are her people's bodies. She then states that her sister isn't there and reveals that her people were used to extract their magical abilities. Afterwards, Tomo asks Theodisa what she plans to do next, and she says she has to avenge the death of her people. Outside the tower, Urabe tells Rick that he'll be the next swords master after him. Surprised, Rick asks what he's supposed to do after that, and Urabe says that he could put up a fight using the power stored in the tower. Just then, Lionel asks Vahanado why she's chatting with the Ops, and in response, Vahanado reveals that she's in love with Albert Gamma, the Dark God, and ever since he's been sealed, she has sent different warriors who couldn't defeat the Sword Master. In addition, she says that she recruited him, hoping his bad luck would ruin things for the Sword Master, leaving Lionel devastated. Just then, Luke points out that the barrier is weakening, so Vahanado pulls out the barrier core and crushes it to break what's left of the barrier. Suddenly, Albert Gamma's body drops in the water, and when it floats, everyone realizes he's been dead all along. Unknown to them, Yogiri had terminated him out of reflex at the start of the test. Almost immediately, Theodisa slashes open Urabe's throat to avenge her people, making Tomo freak out while Vahanado suddenly gets impaled by Hedgehog, who then flies away afterward. Quickly, Lute heals her and she suddenly shrieks like she's lost her mind. Organe then retrieves Albert Gamma's body from the water and orders his minions to avenge their master by sacrificing the humans. Suddenly, an army of winged demons approaches the humans, some of which the Divine King shields, but Yogiri takes the demons out at once. On the other hand, Vahanado has now fully gone nutjob and was firing off random shots all over the place. In that moment, Ayui arrives, still dragging Daimon, who is scared to bits. However, she uses her ability and safely strolls over to the others amidst the chaos. When she asks Rick about Yogiri's whereabouts, he says her timing is poor. So, Ayoi appraises him with her magic eye and discovers that Rick is a sword master. She then tells him to slay Vahanado with his holy sword to end the chaos. Immediately, Rick dashes out of the shield and runs Vahanado through. Afterwards, when the dust clears up, Ayoi finds Yogiri with Tomo and Theodisa, so she checks out his abilities and suddenly crashes her drive in the process. Triggered by what she saw, Ayoi gets sick on the spot and apologizes. When Yogiri tries to calm her down, Ayoi says she only came to deliver Diamond back to him. Yogiri then says he doesn't want Diamond either, but Ayoi abandons him and vanishes. Facing Diamond, Yogiri asks what happened with his collar and reveals that it only worked for a while. Some moments later, those left gathered, and Rick asked why Theodisa unalived Urabe. In responses, Theodisa says she avenged her people and adds that it's none of his business. However, when Rick says he's the new swords master, Yogiri steps in and offers to help Theodisa get her vengeance. Surprised, Rick asks Yogiri what he can do since he has no abilities, but the Divine King reveals that Yogiri single-handedly took out the Dark God and his horde of demons. While they all discuss their next plans, Theodisa announces that she's going to find her sister, who happens to be Euphemia. Before Yogiri and Tomo leave for the capital, and Rick gifts them with necklaces that might save them if they get in trouble at the capital. Afterwards, everyone parts ways, leaving Diamond behind without a handler. Just then, someone shows up and asks him about what happened. Meanwhile, in Shien's mansion, Yuichi informs her that Ayoi is missing and couldn't take down Yogiri. Since she's out of ideas on what to do with Yogiri, she summons a scientist from the institute where Yogiri was created. While the dude freaks out about jumping worlds, his head suddenly pops off, surprising Shien. Far from all these Ayaka, one of the sage candidates awakens on the attacked bus and realizes she's been rebooted to life as an android. Hearing the systems converse, she figures she died and gets notified that she'll be permanently shut down in 30 minutes if she doesn't get enough materials to facilitate her recovery. Just then, she gets out of the bus and spots the dead dragon and feasts on it. Sometime before all this, at the institute, Asaka tries to cook a decent meal for the first time in her life and ends up cooking a burnt offering. When Yogiri gives his honest reviews, she shuts him up and gaslights him into thinking he's ungrateful. When she's done, Yogiri chugs the food down his throat and says it's delicious. On checking the manual, she realizes that she has to teach Yogiri, but since she lied on her resume, she gets pissed and hopes it's okay to teach him elementary stuff. Just then, an android walks in with groceries, so Asaka asks it to get an elementary textbook, a dog, and a buzzing joystick on its next delivery. After spending some time with Yogiri outside the house, Asaka figures she can't cope, so she complains to Yukio and suggests that they employ more people. However, Yukio says that everyone who applied resigned after the first day. Although Asaka understands why, she complains about staying locked up with Yogiri for days, so Yukio drops a bundle of cash, but Asaka says it's useless there. Yukio then says she can always go out, surprising Asaka, so she asks about who will watch Yogiri, and Yukio says the robots can do that while she's gone. On hearing this, Asaka decides to go on a vacation. Sometime later, after having a blast shopping and living the dream, Asaka suddenly finds herself locked up in a room where an automated voice reveals that she is safe and the organization would like to have a few words with her. Later, at the Yogiri's house, the robot arrives with groceries and Yogiri asks about Asaka. When the robot says she's on vacation, Yogiri gets sad and wonders if she'll ever return. A few moments later, he asks the robots where Asaka went, but since the robot has no idea, it suggests that Asaka ask the researchers. Afterwards, the robot takes Yogiri to the entrance and explains that it can only be opened from the control room. Yogiri then speaks to the cameras and states that he needs to get out, but before they could get Yukio, bodies were already dropping all over the place. When Yukio arrives, they realize one of them has let him out and is helping him find his way. When he arrives, Yukio asks the security dude to shoot the lady helping Yogiri, but he suddenly drops dead, making Yukio realize they're screwed. Just then, Yogiri arrives in the control room and asks Yukio about Asaka, but Yukio reveals that she isn't coming back since the agency took her. Yogiri then asks why he's not helping her, and Yukio says it's beyond him, so Yogiri decides to help her by himself. Shortly after, Yogiri breaks into the agency, and while the security guys plot to take him down, he drops them all at once. While Asaka regrets applying for the job in her holding room, a lady suddenly enters and holds her at gunpoint. Coincidentally, Yogiri arrives and gets excited upon finding Asaka. While the lady with the gun threatens to off Asaka, Yogiri drops her dead and tells Asaka to go home with him. When they step out, Asaka freaks out on seeing how much damage she has done. When they return to the house, Asaka asks Yukio what will happen afterwards, but he says nothing can be done about it. When he adds that they can't allow Asaka to quit, she freaks out and says that although she can't do it forever, she's not ready to quit yet since something worse might happen if she does. Back in the present, Tomo watches Yogiri sleep and Momo suggests she spend the rest of her life with him. Shocked, Tomo asks Momo if she's reading minds now, and while they talk about the possibility of mixing genes, Yogiri wakes from sleep. Just then, Momo points out that they're surrounded, so the men outside tell them to step out, and when they do, their leader introduces himself as Torque, the lead security guard of the South Central Gate, and says that the car belongs to the Immortal Court. In response, Yogiri says they got the car from Ryota and adds that they're sage candidates. To confirm their claims, Torque has them appraised, and even when it's confirmed, the guards still refuse to believe them. So Yogiri presents the necklace Rick gave them, and immediately, the soldiers get on their knees. While they wonder what the necklace pendant means, Torque explains that the pendant has the royal family crest engraved on it. After this, David, the youngest prince of the royal family, asks them to show their holy swords, but Yogiri says they don't have any. To prove their claims, David challenges them to a duel, so Momo and Yogiri persuade Tomo to fight and promise to step in if things go south. Shortly after, the duel begins, and although Tomo brings a dagger to a sword fight, she waves her dagger and slowly moves closer to David. Before he knows what's happening, Tomo throws her dagger up and breezes past him to get behind him and crush his nuts. Impressed, the soldiers cheer her on while David is in pain. Some moments later, within the walls, Yogiri examines the walls, and David explains that the walls are spelled and were built by a glacier in ancient times. When Yogiri remembers meeting him at the tower, David asks if he knows a glacier, and just when he says he does, Tomo arrives, scaring David, who then offers to be their tour guide. While they tour the city, Tomo notices that there are many warriors around. So David explains that they are explorers who came to challenge the underworld, since a dark god, sealed below the royal capital, is trying to escape. Hearing this, Yogiri suggests they continue their journey since he doesn't want any part of it, but Tomo scolds him for being cold to their tour guide. However, Yogiri reminds her that they'll be reuniting with their classmates soon, but he's more bothered about whether or not to forgive them. Afterwards, they arrive in a hall with the other, and the king addresses them, saying they must have come for a second mission. Suddenly, Shyness shuts the king up and reminds him that they're not his subjects, so the king slices off his fingers to teach him some manners. Sometime later, Shien steps into another dimension and finds Aoi sulking and regretting ever attempting to take out Yogiri. Meanwhile, Lute interrogates Diamond about Yogiri, but Demon reveals that Yogiri slays people as easily as you fall for rage baits on X. However, Lute says that although he doesn't believe it's possible to end people with just thoughts, eliminating Yogiri is a priority. Curious, Diamond asks how he intends to make that happen, and Lute pulls out a weird key, saying he'll get help from Almagama's younger sister, who was sealed away for being too chaotic. On hearing this, Diamond tries to remove himself from the situation, but Lute catches him and says he needs someone familiar with Yogiri before dragging him off. Back at the royal capital, the king of Mani tells the sage candidates that they'll have to traverse the underworld and defeat the dark god to succeed. In addition, he states that a base will be prepared for them and takes his leave. Just then, everyone notices Tomo's presence and freaks out, wondering how she survived. However, she tells them to acknowledge Yogiri too. Afterwards, the Divine King arrives at the capital and is welcomed by Hilarious, the Archbishop of the Church. Shortly after, at the bishop's office, she reveals that the dark god in the canyon is defeated. Hilarious then asks about the sealing key, but since the Divine King wonders what that is, he pulls it out and it suddenly makes her uncomfortable. Somewhere else, Kazaki meets with Tomo and Yogiri and says he feels no remorse about leaving them behind, but when Tomo tries to talk some sense into his head, Sora passes by. Immediately, Kazaki tells her that they can't be trusted, and Sora responds by saying he'd seek revenge too if he were in their shoes. Seeing this, Yogiri and Tomo wonder who the real leader is between them. Afterwards, Yogiri chats with Yugo and Yukimasa, who think Yogiri is just like them since their skills suck. Just then, Fukai, another classmate who looks like he used latex, shows up and requests to talk with Yogiri. He then reveals that he's a death god like Yogiri and adds that he was told to keep tabs on Yogiri. Suddenly, he takes out his eye while stating that the eyes could see the supernatural, but stopped working when he jumped worlds. After he leaves, the other boy thinks Fukai is just a weirdo while Yogiri checks out the eye. At the same time, Tomo catches up with the ladies, and they tell her about the Eroge nobles, which include Ushio, who can stop time, Manikata, who has X-ray vision, and Yadagi, who has tentacles. Just then, Ryoko arrives and says she'd like to talk to Tomo about Yogiri, so they find Yogiri and head out. While Ryoko kneels and apologizes to Yogiri, Carol joins them. Ryoko then tells Carol to join her since Yogiri could unalive them anytime, but Yogiri says he won't do that. After this, he asks if they know something about him, and Carol explains that they're both from the agency and just like Fukai, they're dispatched to keep tabs on him. While Yogiri feels bad about this, Carol asks Tomo if he's hitting it yet, making Tomo freak out. After this, Yogiri asks the girls about what's going on, and they reveal that Sora uses a skill called Vow, which prevents their targets from using their gifts. In addition to this, Carol states that Sora became the leader when Yazaki lost his balls. After the ladies affirm that breaking the vow leads to instant death, they ask Yogiri why they joined them at the capital. In response, Yogiri says he intends to talk to Shion about returning home. After this, Yogiri asks if they're on the same page, and the ladies say they're with him. The next day, the ladies meet up to start their next mission, and while they compare their outfits, Rick shows up as their guide. Somewhere else, David shows up as the guide for the boys and brags about being able to suppress demonic creatures. Haruto then asks if he could suppress their powers too, and David says it's possible. However, he offers to guide them to where the demonic creatures are. In the underworld, the ladies take care of business, amusing Rick, who then says he shouldn't have come at all. When the other ladies doubt Tomo's abilities, she steps up and takes down a few monsters to show them she's capable. At the same time, Yogiri figures out a way to take down monsters without appearing like a psychopath, impressing the boys. Somewhere in the city, Diamond reluctantly walks with Lute, who's now dressed as a girl, and weeps from embarrassment. After walking for a while, Lute points out that Albagama's sister is somewhere under the city, but since he doesn't know the entrance, they decide to gather intel at a nearby tavern. Outside the city, Euphemia aimlessly walks around but runs into a little girl, who she then realizes is Lane reincarnated, so she takes a bow and introduces herself. Just then, the girl realizes she doesn't have a name, so she names herself Risley on the spot. At the tavern in the royal capital, Diamond suggests that they eavesdrop on people's conversations. However, Lute says it's a dumb idea and asks a waitress if there is a festival in the city. The waitress then reveals that the city is celebrating the arrival of the sage candidates on the 5th level of the underworld. Suddenly, Diamond sees some of his classmates in the tavern, and before he blows their cover, Lute casts a recognition blocker. Just then, they listen and hear the boys complaining about Yogiri showing up and stealing all the baddies. At that moment, a hooded lady asks if they're the sage candidates. Thinking the gods are finally smiling on them, they affirm this and try to appraise the lady, who turns out to be Ayaka. Suddenly, they freak out on realizing it's her, but Ayaka grabs Ushio and beats the life out of him. When she's done, she vows to take down one of her classmates each day and asks Munakata to inform the others. While everyone at the tavern runs for their lives, Diamond says that Ayaka is vengeful for being left behind and freaks out when he realizes he's also a target. Suddenly, Shion walks up to them and asks Diamond if he remembers her. When he says he does, he announces that they're leaving already to continue their research of the underworld. Shion then offers to tell them all about it if he'll tell her about Yogiri in return. When they sit to talk, Shion reveals that Yogiri could track murderous intent, and when Lute says he'll take care of him, Shion says it's impossible for a mere underling of the Dark God. She then reveals that they can catch a sight of the underworld entrance by buying a ticket at the tavern. Later at Shion's mansion, Yuichi notifies Shion that the sage candidates will soon arrive at the 7th level of the underworld. She then decides to make their lives miserable, while Yuichi asks what plans she has for Yogiri. Just then, Haruto shows up uninvited and requests that Shion give them a time extension to achieve their mission. In response, Shion says she would, if he would get rid of Yogiri. On a balcony somewhere, Ayaka enjoys the evening breeze but suddenly gets hit on the head by a rock. Suddenly, her support systems locate the source of the attacks as she evades more rocks hurled at her. So she flies to the top of a nearby roof and finds Riona, a gorilla-class sage candidate, who then suddenly attacks her. However, Ayaka blocks the attack and takes off Riona's arm. At this point, Riona says she lost because the royal family suppressed her gift. So Riona suggests they finish the fight some other time and takes her leave. Meanwhile, Diamond and Lute explore the underworld and suddenly encounter Mana, a dark god who then claims she could perceive Albanama's scent on Lute, so she located him. Somewhere else, Yusuke, another assassin, gets a letter telling him that his new target is Yaogiri and where to find him. Meanwhile, Yaogiri plays games in his room and Tomo walks in saying he's been idling away. Yaogiri then says he's been working on holding back on his attacks since he needs to get clues from Shion. When she asks what else he's been up to, Yaogiri remembers that he went to the city but felt like he was being targeted, so he asks for Tomo's help. In the underworld, Diamond asks Mana how she could move around freely when she's been sealed, but Mana says that her brother was lenient and used a weak seal. After this, she says that since she could smell her brother's scent, they must have brought something connected to him. Quickly, Lute presents the key to the seal, getting Mana excited, so she asks them to follow her. In the royal capital, Ayaka's support system confirms the king's presence in his chambers, so she flies over there and breaks into the room. When the king asks who she is, Ayaka says she has come to destroy the seal that nullifies people's gifts, since it's getting in her way. Suddenly, the king tries to roast her alive, but she defends herself using a dragon scale spell. In retaliation, Ayaka casts a Dragon Fang spell, turns the king into a nice roast, disappointing Ayaka. Shortly after, she breaks into the hospital where Ryoja is being treated and says she has eliminated the king, and now they can fight on even grounds. Suddenly, Riona hops out of bed and knocks Ayaka down. Without wasting time, Riona overloads her with punches, but Ayaka takes off her arm again with the Dragon Fang spell. To make matters worse, Ayaka gets Riona strangled with a Dragon Tail spell and finishes her off. Meanwhile, Yaogiri and Tomo stroll around the city, and he explains that since she's got good eyes, he was hoping she could help him spot anyone targeting him. So, Tomo says he'll have to treat her to a meal in exchange, and Yaogiri agrees. So while they decide to check out a restaurant, a sniper aims at Yaogiri and is being tortured to pull the trigger. However, the sniper suddenly drops dead, so the assassins decide to aim for Tomo next. A few moments later, Yaogiri and Tomo arrive at what's left of the restaurant and realize it's in crumbles, thanks to Ayaka. Just when Tomo suggests they check other places, Yaogiri pulls her close, and a bullet misses her and hits someone else. Suddenly, Yusuke loses connection of his drone and freaks out. Unknown to him, Momo knocked it out of the air and surprised the signal source. Quickly, Yusuke gets on his helicopter since they've been discovered and tries to escape, but his engine suddenly loses power. So he ejects and uses a parachute, so Tomo hops on him out of nowhere and takes him down. Yaogiri then tells him to stand still if he wants to live, while Momo takes out the remains of some spirits who came to attack them. Shocked, Yusuke comments that the spirits are the final boss of all spirits, but Momo says no spirit is better than she is. After she squashes the dead spirits, Yusuke summons a Fenrir, but Yaogiri puts it down easily. Immediately, Yusuke tries to summon a goddess, but Yaogiri takes her out before she fully appears. Suddenly, a robot named Enju throws a knife at Yaogiri, but Tomo catches it, leaving Yaogiri shocked. So he commands Enju to shut down and puts her down while Tomo wonders how he knows her. Yaogiri then says he'll explain later and tells Yusuke to spill everything he knows. While Haruto researches Yaogiri somewhere else, Mana gives Diamond and Lute a tour of the world she built herself on the 7th floor. Just when Lute thanks Diamond for going that far with him, Demon thinks he's about to get disposed. However, Lute hands him the seal key to make him feel useful, but he suggests that Lute hold on to it. After Yusuke reveals all he knows, Yaogiri decides to terminate him for making copies of Enju. Afterwards, Yaogiri explains that Enju is a childhood friend he played with and a Terminator was made in her image to hunt him. Somewhere nearby, Ayaka deals with another classmate who's a cook and claims there's no ingredient he can't chop up. When Ayaka says he's overrating himself, she attacks him with the Dragon Claw, but he pulls a Shadow Clone Jutsu, and the moment the clones try to attack, Yukimasa, a script reader, reads a prediction from his weird book that Yugo gets burnt. Suddenly, Ayaka ascends and cremates Yugo and his clone using Dragon Breath. Afterward, the remaining classmates meet, and Sora announces that they've lost 8 students to Ayaka alone and states that she targets the weak ones who are alone. She then suggests they attempt to achieve something great in the underworld so they can finish their mission. The next day, Yaogiri and Tomo visit the 6th layer of the underworld with David, so they suggest that he leave before things get ugly, but David decides to stay. Just then, they join the other classmates and encounter an army of monsters, so they joined efforts and eliminated the monsters one after the other. Meanwhile, in the 7th layer, Lute informs Man that Albagama is dead, but to her surprise, she takes the news well. So when Diamond states that Lute is trying to help her avenge him, Mana says she has to give birth to him. Suddenly, she churns out arms from her body and says she'll need their brains to help rebirth her brother. She then tells them to remove the seal and Diamond inserts the key. Later at night, Yogiri plays a game in the forest alone and suddenly spots David moving like a zombie. He then goes after him and saves him from jumping off a cliff. Just then, he notices a weird aura down the cliff as the edge of the cliff breaks and takes them down. Back at the camp, Shivan shows up and says no sage will emerge from the candidates because they have it too easy. She then says she wants an awakening event where they'll purge each other till there's only one person left. While they freak out on hearing this, Ruko gets notified of a second gate opening. Somewhere in the mountains, Theodisa spots some slave traders transporting some sus cargo. So she attacks them and suddenly spots a wand master extracting magic from the barrels, but she takes them out, and the wand master flees. So she opens the barrels to find half-demon girls being trafficked. Just then she looks up and realizes the wand master has been executed by someone, who turns out to be Euphemia. Back at the camp, Shivan announces that the trial will commence in an hour and adds that anyone who doesn't participate or tries to escape will be snuffed out, and the survivor wins the trial. While they're all freaked out by this, Fukai approaches Shion and tries his best to end her using his ability, but since it doesn't work, he continues trying till Shion ends him herself. Meanwhile, Tomo searches the forest for Yaogiri and finds Romiko and Jayuna running and claiming they're in trouble. At the same time, while Yaogiri and David drop from the cliff, he recalls a moment when Asaka taught him to think well about things and make rules for himself. So he decides not to die yet and breaks his momentum using his ability and drops on the 7th floor, which looks like a rip-off of Disneyland. After Diamond breaks the seal, he suggests they leave the underworld, but Mana comments that his hideous face gets on her nerves. Hearing this, Demon grabs Lute and tries to escape, but the ground suddenly turns to gum. And Lute explains that Mana's body is expanding from preparing to rebirth Albagama, so she kicks Diamond out of the gum and tells him to escape. But when he turns back, Lute gets swallowed by Mana's expansion. After Theodisa and Euphemia's reunion, Riley reveals that she's headed to the royal capital to find Yaogiri, but since she's not sure he'll be there, Theodisa assures her that they'll find him there. In the 7th layer of the underworld, Diamond runs from Mana's expansion and runs into Yaogiri, who then stops the expansion. After this, he asks Diamond how they can return to the 6th layer, and Diamond offers to take him to a shortcut if he'll protect him from Mana's jelly expansion. When he agrees, Yaogiri asks Diamond to take David along. Back at the camp, the trial has begun, so Tomo hides in a tree and watches Kyoko, a gunslinger, strap up, while Kaoru looks for her first opponent. Yukimasa predicts her moves by reading his weird script and realizes that she has just encountered Ayaka. On the tree, Momo appears and informs Tomo that Yaogiri fell into the 7th level. Worried, she asks if he's okay, and Momo says that although he's lost, she already told him of their location. After this, Tomo says it'll be fine to hide in the trees since she didn't get the madness installed in her. Meanwhile, Yaogiri and Diamond arrive at an entrance, and on the other side, Yukizama tries to open the same door but fails while reading his script. He then predicts that Diamond and Yaogiri will emerge from the door, so he gets excited about uniliving them and tries to write the script to make this happen. However, the script rewrites itself and, in other words, reveals that he'll get eliminated. Annoyed, he rips off the page, but the script tells him to rest in peace. Almost immediately, the door opens, and Yaogiri snuffs him out. Freaked out, Diamond says he's their classmate, but Yaogiri says he could sense death intent coming from him. Somewhere else, a saint chills in her room but suddenly hears someone talking about her slacking off in his domain. Before long, her bed vanishes and a huge block drops on her. Thinking he ate, Osumo, a carpenter who fabricates structures, turns to leave, but suddenly spots May appear behind him. Shocked, he asks how she survived, and May reveals she teleported. Surprised, Masahiro, whose ability is to teleport, wonders how she pulled it off and suddenly makes it rain lava on her. But since she remains unscathed, they realize they're screwed. So May says she's immune to attacks and takes out Masahiro with a holy punch. After this, she explains that she got her powers from 2 fighting cats before the trip and hits Osumo with a holy beam. Shortly after, May runs into Yaogiri and Diamond in the forest, so Yaogiri asks if she's trying to attack them too. Almost immediately, May tries her holy punch, but Yaogiri uses a Wing Chun technique. Surprised, Diamond asks if he wasn't going to offer, but Yaogiri decides to take out the cats powering her instead. While Kyoko and Ayaka go head-on against each other, Mom suddenly points out that some just let loose some spirits, which are causing electromagnetic disturbance. As a result, they can't contact Yaogiri. So Tomo hops off the tree and suddenly gets swarmed by ghosts. At the same time, Mikochi approaches them. So Tomo figures she must be the sorcerer. When she arrives, Mikochi apologizes for hiding her true class from Tomo and reveals that she's a necromancer. She then reveals that she has a guiding spirit named Chianu. Upon seeing Mikochi's pretty guiding spirit, Tomo decides to swap her fat and ugly Momo for Chianu, who was ripped and pretty. Mikochi then accepts the offer since all Chianu can do is count. Suddenly, they swap spirits and Momo possesses Mikochi to get her revenge on Tomo for body shaming her. However, Tomo evades her attacks until she finds a way to dismantle Tomo's suit. In that moment, Yaogiri arrives with Diamond, so he knocks the idiot out before he could see anything and proceeds to cover Tomo with his jacket. Somewhere else, Kazaki forms a group, and when they run into Sora, he tries to get her on his team, but Sora declines. So they prepare to attack her, but since she's an idol, she summons her diehard fans who then hug her attackers and blow them all up. Nearby, Mana's expansion jelly spills out and starts swallowing the Sage candidates. Seeing this, Haruto unveils his hidden wings, and when he takes off, he realizes the jelly is surrounding the city. Meanwhile, Mikochi suddenly awakens her ability and expels Momo from her body. Just when she tries to attack, Yaogiri takes her out, making Tomo regain her outfit. As they head back to the city, Carol and Ryoko show up and reveal that they've been hiding and hoping they find Yaogiri since they'll be safe with him. Suddenly, Yaogiri senses the sky turn red and tells his companions to get behind him. A large explosion then rocks the city and spreads to the forests. After the explosion, Ayaka gets notified by her support systems that she has taken serious damage from an explosion, and they suggest she hibernates to heal completely. But Ayaka decides to go against the system's advice by instantly healing herself. When the system reveals that she'll be permanently changed into a dragon, Ayaka ignores the warning and suddenly transforms. While Yaogiri and his companions try to figure out where the explosion came from, Ayaka's systems notify her that she can use a search skill to locate survivors and summon dragon warriors. Immediately, Ayaka dislodges all her teeth, and they turn into an army of dragon warriors. Shortly after, they arrive at Yaogiri's location, and on spotting her classmates, Ayaka orders the warriors to attack. However, Yaogiri puts them out of service at once, surprising Ayaka. So she wonders what went wrong, and when her system suddenly spots Yaogiri, it suggests that they retreat, but since Ayaka is bent on getting her revenge, she disregards the warning and tries to roast them alive. So Yaogiri takes her out, and when they take a closer look at the soldiers, they realize they're Ayaka's clones. After they leave, they run into Shion, who then talks big until Yaogiri deactivates one of her ankles. So Yaogiri heads over to her and tells her to answer his questions while explaining that he has finally perfected the art of partially deactivating body parts. Suddenly, Shion tries to use the instant death magic on him, but Yaogiri says she's wasting her time, and that can make him end her by accident. He then asks Shion how they could get out of the world, but she tries the instant death magic again. Suddenly, she notices that some of her fingers have stopped moving, so she vanishes while Diamond berates Yaogiri for letting her escape. After this, Shion reappears in her mansion in need of a wheelchair, and she detaches her hand to grow another. Unfortunately, her fingers refuse to work, so Yaogiri deals more damage to other parts of her body, surprising her. So she remembers his promise to keep at it until she speaks. Just then, Yuichi enters the room and suddenly starts losing control of his body parts too, since his wand is important to her. Shion reappears before Yaogiri and begs him to spare Yuichi. In response, Yaogiri tells her he can get her and her allies wherever they are and asks her for the way out of the world. Shion then says there's no way out, but Yaogiri says that Damien and his friends once visited the world and left. So, Shion explains that it was possible when their worlds were linked, but since the link doesn't exist anymore, Yaogiri asks for the coordinates of his original world. Shion then gives it up while Momo memorizes it, excited that she can be useful for once. After this, Yaogiri asks Shion for the power required for their trip back home, and Shion pulls out a Philosopher's Stone and states that they'll be needing a lot of it to power the world jump. So, Yaogiri takes the stone while Shion adds that although the stones emerge after eliminating sages, they lose their power if the sages are eliminated by Yaogiri. So he asks for the location of the other sages, but Shion says she doesn't know where they are. After this, Yaogiri tells Diamond to locate an entrance while Diamond berates him for sparing Shion. After they leave, Shion decides to return home and tend to Yuichi. However, Mana's jelly tangles her up and prevents her from teleporting. Just then, Mana shows up in the jelly, and when Shion realizes she's a dark god, she detaches her leg and tries to escape, but Mana pulls her back into the jelly. Since she can't defend herself, Shion tells Mana that Yaogiri will avenge her. Afterwards, Mana's jelly spreads all through the city and Rick tries attacking the jelly, but soon realizes it's more than he can handle alone. Meanwhile, Yaogiri and his friends arrive on a roof in the city and spot Halurus celebrate Mana's takeover of the city. At this point, David is awake and is surprised by the bishop's crazy display. However, Yaogiri ends the show quickly, annoying Diamond, who then says they might have gotten more information about Mana's plans. Shortly after, Mana's jelly climbs over the walls and breaks the city barriers. Diamond then blames himself for breaking Mana's seal and narrates how it all happened. Just then, Mana appears out of the jelly and upon seeing Diamond, she asked about Yaogiri, since she's heard he murdered her brother. Without wasting time, Diamond points to Yaogiri, so Mana suddenly gets angry. So she tries to crush him, but Yaogiri simply tells her to die. So she vanishes, leaving the city full of tomato sauce. Shortly after, they head to the palace roof, where they find a glider that could fit only 5 people. However, since Diamond's weight counts for 5, Yaogiri suggests that he doesn't join the flight. So after his protests, a few of them take off on the glider, leaving Yaogiri and Tomo on the roof. When Tomo asks if they stay behind for some steamy post-apocalypse session, Momo says she's been working on something and transforms Tomo's outfit. Since her plots are almost popping out, Tomo covers up and asks if they're supposed to fly with that. Just then, Momo instructs Yaogiri to cling to Tomo, so he does and gets a better view of her mega orbs. After this, Tomo leaps off the roof and floats like a Batman order from Timu. Shortly after, they reunite with the other outside the city and decide to rest in a nearby city. Just then, they realize that Diamond is nowhere to be found. When Carol asks if it's okay to tag along, Yaogiri says they can, but adds that he's only getting enough energy to take him and Tomo back home. Just then, a carriage arrives and Risley hops off it to ask Yaogiri to marry her. However, when he hits her with an instant rejection, Thevadisa and Euphemia step out and teach Risley Riz 101. After the brief reunion, Risley hands Yaogiri a Philosopher's Stone to get him to consider her offer. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the Divine King wonders how Yaogiri managed to eliminate Mana and decides they can't ignore a monster like that, while Diamond runs into the forest desperate to remain in the world and build himself a harem. Later, while Yaogiri rests on Tomo's lap, he flashes back to the moment Asaka taught him to follow his heart, rather than the rules that someone else came up with. Which of Shien's gifts to the students do you think is the coolest? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like more videos like this, like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.